Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Author Tells. Today, we have a very exciting guest with us. We have Jessica Summer, the author of Bound by Faith, an exciting paranormal romance book, which is releasing on the Saga Fiction app on 3rd October. And I'm going to turn it over to Jessica now to talk a little bit about herself and tell us a little bit about her book.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks for having me. I'm so excited. I feel so special that you would even want to interview me. So I'm really happy to be here. Yeah, I'm Jessica. I'm a writer, I guess. I'm from Las Vegas here in the US, which is kind of fun. It's different being from a city that's typically a tourist destination, but when you grow up there, you experience it very differently than people who are on vacation. But it's been fun. That's been my experience. It's been really fun. I've enjoyed it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm 28 years old. I'm married. I've been married to my husband for 8 years. We got married very young, obviously. But he's great. He's great, and I love him, and I'm grateful I have him. And we have 2 beautiful children. I have a daughter who's 7 and a son who's 4. And I've been writing for 4 years now. I started right after my son was born, so it makes it pretty easy to keep track. And yeah, that's about me. Do you want me to explain the book, or that's good?
Yes, you can. I think we should give our audiences a summary of Bound by Faith. That would be great. And after the summary, maybe you can tell us a little about how you got to writing it, because you said you started it 4 years ago. That's a long time ago, and you wrote the book for 4 years. So yeah, that's quite interesting. So tell us a little bit about the book and just how you got to writing it.
Yeah. Okay. So I started it and I wrote it and I finished it all 4 years ago within about the span of 3 or 4 months. It was all very quick. And then I put it online within that time frame too. And yeah, it's about a 15-year-old girl, a Native American girl, and her best friend who happens to be a werewolf, and he happens to find himself, which is like this emotional connection, this just irrevocably deep love at first sight connection to her when she was still just a baby, when she was under 2. And so she's grown up with him, and he was 17. So she's grown up her entire life with him in her life, and he's been her best friend. And she always knew that they were soulmates and they were supposed to grow up and be together. And he just always viewed them as being very necessary in each other's lives. And so he's always been very happy with his life the way it is, just having her in it and being best friends and kind of being a part of watching her grow up. And she's kind of always had these little girl fantasies of growing up. And I think most little girls dream of, well, maybe not most, but a lot of little girls dream about growing up and finding their Prince Charming and having these epic romantic moments, or picturing their wedding with big floofy dresses. And for her, it was always picturing and wondering about him. It was always so specific that she knew it was him. It was always going to be him. And kind of just waiting, she herself is kind of waiting to grow up to be with him. And then inevitably she reaches this age where she's in high school and another boy notices her. And the other boy, starts trying to get to know her and ask her out. And she is not in any way emotionally prepared for that scenario, because she's only ever had one goal in mind, one person in mind. And it's been Dakota, her best friend werewolf. And yeah, then I think a wrench gets thrown in her plans a little bit, and that's kind of where it starts and where it goes from there. So that's kind of like the summary, I think, the explanation of the book. Did you want more explanation of where it came from? How that happened to be?
But how do you get inspired by it? Because this is quite a different story. So a couple of questions actually, which came to my mind when you were describing the story was, relationships play such a big part of the story, because it's about a very weird relationship in a way, something not heard of usually, about a 17-year-old being in love with a 2-year-old, and if they're not, he's not in love with the 2-year-old. that would be a little weird. But did
Right.
you ever think that while you were writing this, that it is
No,
weird?
yeah, that wouldn't be right.
I mean, did you think when you're writing it that
Yeah. Oh, for
it is weird?
sure.
Yeah, you thought that because
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 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 for sure. That was always like, and it's funny because, I mentioned my husband, he's been such a crucial part of my writing experience because it wasn't like we got married so young, honestly, that I think we both figured out who we were like as adults
mm,
within our relationship. We weren't one of those couples that like kind of grew into ourselves and then found each other and then got married when we already knew who we were. So we had been married for a good 4 years before I started writing ever. Had no idea I could write. That was not a part of my life or who I was. And so he's been this crazy crucial part of my writing to the extent of I've wondered, like, if we ever like work together, which, hopefully that doesn't happen. I want to stay with him. But I'm just like, I don't know if I could. Like, he's been so crucial. I'm like, could I even write anymore? Would it just like, would that go away? Because so much of it is, so much worry about those things of like, is this going to come across as this perverted pedophile thing and always bouncing off of him? And that is always a concern because that is just fundamentally not a part of his relationship. I think that was so important why his perspective was written in, because it was so important to see the way he thinks and the way he thinks about her. And she is so much more aware of not him, aware of their relationship than he is. He's very aware of her because she's really his most important focus, the most important thing in his life. But he's not very aware of their relationship. I think he doesn't really think about that. So yeah, I was always very, very concerned about that. Yeah, I definitely had that thought. I had a lot of questions, a lot of back and forth of like, does this come across? Because I don't want it to. That's definitely not the intention ever, and I was very aware of that. So hopefully I hope that's not how it reads.
no, it doesn't. It doesn't come across as that. But I think that's always interesting because you had a fine balance. You had to make sure the relationship was romantic yet at the same time not creepy, because it could easily come across as that. But having read the book, I know it doesn't, because you have
Yeah.
that fine balance, and
Well, thank you.
and you've kind of nurtured the relationship between Celeste and Dakota. It's forming naturally, and it's such a part of their nature. To now, the fact that they're kind of, she's noticing boys and she's feeling attracted towards other boys, she's battling her attraction for Goda, and she herself finds it kind of unnatural, and she's trying to find the balance, which I think makes a very important crux of the book. What how difficult was it to write those kind of scenes, because there's a lot of emotional
Mm-hmm.
scenes in the book, and I know that takes a toll on, you as a writer, and since you're really invested with your characters, how is it writing those kind of scenes?
Well, I think first of all, the crux of it is that to start out, it had to start that the relationship wasn't romantic. Their relationship was very much just very lovingly platonic, and almost familial. They are so intertwined in each other's lives, and they have been for basically her entire life. At this point, they've been together for 14 years. Not like as a couple, but together in each other's lives. And so they're so ingrained in their day-to-day life that they almost have a borderline codependent relationship. I would say Dakota is very codependent on Celeste, and Celeste is more aware, so she's not nearly so much codependent as she chooses him until maybe another choice is put before her, and then the question is, now what does she choose? Because she never really chose this has happened to her basically as a baby, and it's been a part of her life that she's always accepted and never questioned, right? And so I think it definitely had to start from a place of them not being romantic and then that developing. And so I think that happened pretty organically. Just I think I started writing because it was what interested me. So in fact, it was never intended to be shared with really anybody. So this writing in particular needed so much work because it was all so self-indulgent. It was not intended for an audience. It was intended for me. So I could indulge as much as I wanted in, long-winded monologues about feelings or, just Celeste doing her makeup for hours on end because it didn't matter, because it was just for me. And yeah, so that required some real work there. But yeah, I think that just that's how it kind of happened, is that I would just visualize the scenes that I thought were most interesting repeatedly. They would play out in my mind, and there were some specific scenes, and so it was always trying to get to those scenes where the relationship developed more. And I would definitely quantify it as a slow burn, of this like slow burn building relationship.
I think
And so, and that's how I did it. It's because I was writing from scene to scene, trying to get to that next scene where it builds a little bit more.
I think that's very true what you said about it being self-indulgent, because I'm sure the writing was almost therapeutic
Yeah,
for
I'm sorry.
you. Because the characters are so well fleshed out, a lot of times in a novel you don't have the time and the space to do that, but with your characters they had the time to breathe through, well, 4 parts of a book, because you allowed them that space. For you it was almost a therapy in writing, which I think creates the best stories, to be honest, because you've put so much thought behind the characters, and that makes every action that they take is so well thought out. You can't really point a finger at it. But one thing I do know is that you were inspired by Twilight to write this book,
Oh,
which is
absolutely.
really interesting. But where did the character of Bennett come in for you? Because we've seen the werewolves, and we've seen the rest of the characters come in through Twilight, and we can see, okay, that you could draw inspiration from there. But the character of Bennett was very interesting for me, who plays a really important part in the books, and especially in book 2 and 3, which are to come. So where did that character come from?
Yeah. Where did Bennett come from? Okay, that's a fun question. Yeah, I think so. If it's not obvious, Dakota and Celeste are based off of Quill and Claire from the Twilight books, and she set them up so beautifully, and then you just get nothing. Because just I think the timeline of where the Twilight series ends and those characters' stories is wrapped up, and we've already been with them for years. And obviously Claire's still a baby, but like it's like this whole setup and then just nothing. And something about that drove me absolutely crazy. And so I was looking for their story. Like I don't know why I got very obsessive about it. I think most writers tend to be obsessive personalities, and I'm definitely that way. And couldn't like let it go. So I started searching online. Like I was like, how can I get this story? And I was like, I'll write Stephanie Meyer and just beg her to write this story because they're her characters. She could, and all I could find was a PO box. Like I would have to write a physical letter and stamp it and mail it. And I was like fan mail, and which like that's great too. But I was like, I'm not doing that's gonna get me nowhere. I just like really need her to write this. So that's when I found fan fiction. And I found some great stories. I discovered the fan fiction website. I found some great stories about Jacob and Renesmee, which was obviously a very similar type of journey. And that definitely worked as some inspiration. But the funny thing is, I actually never found any fan fiction stories about Quill and Claire, which is funny. It's out there. It's a total thing. Like there's a whole genre. So I don't know how I didn't find it, but I'm incredibly grateful that I didn't, because that's what got me to the point where I was like, well, now I just have to create the story. I have to create the story so I can know what happens to these characters. And having, never written anything, never written fiction, never had a desire to write fiction, just really wanted some sort of storyline for these characters to explain. Because I think it's like, the thing that intrigued me so much was the idea of these teenage years, because in Twilight it's explained so well about her childhood and how fun that would be and how they would go so weird together. And then eventually, like, he kind of acts like an uncle role, and then eventually she grows up and they'll get married and be together. And like that's the whole implication. But in my thought was like, but there's gonna be these middle years. These middle years where she's around this age of like 15, she could start dating boys and noticing boys, but he's way older than her. She's not ready to get married. There's no, like they're not. And I was like, that would be such a weird experience. Like, how did she do that? Like, I don't know why I was so obsessed with this idea. But yeah, so I had written a scene of when they like kind of finally get together. I'd written this scene, and in the scene, Claire is older. She's like 17. She's frustrated that Quill had treated her like a child for so long.
Mhm.
And she's just like determined to finally make him see her as like a viable option. And so I wrote this whole scene. It was like a chapter long. And I was pretty excited about it. I was like, finally some resolution. And I shared it with my husband, again, who's crucial to this process. And he like hated it. Like he just, and I was like, how can you hate it? This is great. And he's like, he didn't like the characters. He was like, he was not feeling it. He was like, I just don't get it. Like, I don't know. And then
Wow.
I was like, you know what? I was like, it's just because you don't know these characters. You don't know their backstory. If you knew them, then you wouldn't be so quick to judge them and you would love it. So it's like, this is what I'm going to go back. I'm going to write their backstory briefly, and then you will love it. And you'll love this. You'll love them. And so that is what started all of it. And that is like literally, if you want to know why the book was so fleshed out, that's why the book was so fleshed out. And Bennett, honestly, I knew I needed another character to come in to be the wrench, you know, thrown in the cog of just the thing that like messes with the good balance that they have going in their relationship. And so Bennett is the boy that notices Celeste and is very interested in her and wants to get to know her and is kind of threatening Dakota's position in her life unintentionally because he doesn't know any of this, right? He didn't grow up with this. He doesn't know about werewolves. He doesn't know anything.
Yeah.
And he was very much inspired in a really weird roundabout way. At the time, again, I was pregnant with my son. So I started writing right after he was born. So that was where this like whole obsessive compulsion came in. I was pregnant. I knew I was having a boy. I was trying to think of names for my son that I would like. Both of my characters are named after like literary icons or heroes that I have. Again, I don't know how I didn't realize I should be writing at some point. Like before I was writing, I was naming my children after like my favorite book heroes. So that's true. So he's named after Elizabeth Bennet.
Oh,
And
that's lovely.
thank you. I appreciate. Well, thank you so much. So he's Elizabeth Bennet. So that's my son. And at the time, I was like, I thought it'd be a cute baby name, but then I'm like, well, what about when he's like older, when he's a teenager, and what is he gonna be like? And so I'm sure this comes across as so weirdly Freudian, but in a lot of ways, he was inspired by my son. Of like, I hope he's like a really cute teenage boy who's very fun, confident but not arrogant, somebody who would treat a girl well, but be a lot of fun to be around. I was kind of trying to picture what my son would be like at that age. And honestly, I think that character was developed before he was born. So I always say that Bennett in the book was named before Bennett, my son, but very much he was inspired kind of by, I guess, that. Does that answer? That was a very long explanation for where the heck did Bennett come from? It's like, well, here's a whole long backstory, and then my son gets thrown into it. So, there you go.
It was super interesting to know. I think that was a great journey, like a walk through your journey.
Oh yeah.
That was really good.
And like live time too. I think they experienced it in the same.
They did. They definitely did. I think we've spoken a lot about the fact that they're going to be books 2, 3, and 4 to this series.
Sure.
So it's going to be an entire series, but we haven't kind of told the audience.
It's going to be a saga, Aakriti.
It's a saga on Saga Fiction.
How saga on saga? I'm just kidding. I don't take myself that seriously. I write sagas. No.
Why did you choose actually for it to be a saga, for it to be almost 4 series and so many events taking place? Was there something that you could, it's your choice obviously, to wrap it up at the end of book 1 and just give them a happy ever after, but there is book 2, 3, and 4, so readers already know that book 1 is not going to be the end. There's things to expect. And why did you choose to go about that way?
There was a lot of reasons. I mean, when the book starts, Celeste is 15. So I think no matter what, like, to get to a true happily ever after where I was contented with like their journey being done, you don't need to see any more of it, I felt like she needed to be older than 15. So the entire series covers a lot of years. So that's part of it. I think the other part is that I am just incredibly long-winded. And so they're long. So I had never intended to write a book. And then when I sat down to write their story, and then it became clear that it was going to be a book, I had just thought it was going to be one, and it was going to end getting to that scene. And then it got to be like 600 pages. And I was like not even close to being finished. And I was like, well, I guess I'll break this up. So I had already started putting it on the fan fiction website at that point. And so I kind of just found a natural ending spot and was like, that's the end of the book one. Come back for book two. And so, just because I am so incredibly long-winded, it covers so much. It covers so many years and so much of their growth and development, and both of them. I think they go through so much that to cover all of that.
And it kind of, obviously it's heavily inspired from Twilight, and it did start out as a Twilight fan fiction, but it's grown into so much of its own identity. Like your characters are so far different from Twilight. The setting may be the same with the supernatural creatures, but the characters are so
except there's no vampires.
There's no
vampires. I was like, I don't care about the vampires. I only care about the werewolves.
You only care about the werewolves. So what would you say to kind of your readers if they were to compare it with the Twilight series, and were to compare it to like Quill and Claire and the other characters in the series? What would you kind of say to your readers then, or to Twilight fans?
I would say if you were Team Jacob, then you'll love this. If you're a Team Jacob fan and you like the werewolves, I think you'll love this. And then I think you'd like it even if you were a Team Edward fan, because you're a fan of romance and slow burn, right? I mean, you got through 4 Twilight books, so you liked the slow burn, I'm guessing. So I think if you were a Twilight fan, I think this is for you. Because essentially that's where it came from me. It was just being a Twilight fan. And I think that I hope people enjoy it. That's the only reason why I share it is because I wrote it for what I enjoy. And then I found that there might be other people who actually enjoyed the same thing. And then putting it on the fan fiction website, found that people enjoyed it. And I think the people that enjoy it most tend to be the Twilight fans.
Of course. It was in the Twilight Saga. It is in that setting. But I think it's so lovely to see it. When I read it first as well as a Twilight fan fiction, what I loved was your characters had an identity of their own and a storyline of its own, because while I love the Twilight series and I love reading it, I don't want to keep reading the same series again.
You've already read it.
I already read it. I do want to see similar characters in a setting of their own with a storyline of their own. I think, and that's what really explains Bound by Fate. Even if it is inspired from Twilight, it is in a world of its own, for sure. So that actually brings me to my next question, which is to ask you, what do you love and what do you hate about your book, of your books?
Like as a writer or like as a reader, or both? I guess
both. Yeah, both.
As a writer, the thing I both love and hate the most, I think, as a writer, is actually the emotions, the feelings. Because it's the only way I think that I could write it, is just to like get deep. And again, with this like obsessive personality, I'm also a binger. So I'm either not writing at all for weeks on end, or I'm writing for like 12, 15-hour days for weeks on end. So I mean, not necessarily healthy by any means, but I am a binger. And so I get deep into it. So when they're happy, I feel that, and I'm so happy. But when they are not, and they're confused or at odds, or there's tension and frustration, which there's a lot of, because that's what we enjoy in slow burn, is the tension and frustration. I feel that. And it can be a lot. It can be a lot to feel that, to feel kind of carry their burden with them, because they're so real to me. Like, you have a sense that they're fictional as a writer, but also like if they weren't in some sense real, if you didn't have a real care for them, like you wouldn't be doing it, you wouldn't be writing it. And so it is so real for me that can be really emotionally draining, of feeling their pain and carrying it. And obviously writing is a much longer, slower process than reading. So a scene that you can read in an hour could easily take 2 weeks to write, right? And so you're carrying that, you're feeling that for so long that when they're happy, it's great. And then when they're not, it's just like so heavy and draining. So I do sometimes hate that, but I still enjoy it, I guess. And as a reader, I think I'm so biased because it is so self-indulgent. I just wrote all the things I wanted to see in a novel so bad. So it's still my guilty pleasure read. Like for years, I'll go back and I'll just every like once a year, I'll go back and read. And obviously now within the past year, we've done so much work to change it and take it out of fan fiction. So I've been working on it a lot. But even when, I wasn't working on it, tweaking it, I would just go back and read it and enjoy it as a reader. I do. And that's probably like a really arrogant thing to say. But I wrote it to enjoy it. And I do, like, I'll giggle at my own jokes and I'll read through and be like, I love this. They're going to get together finally, like. And so, yeah, I definitely do it because I enjoy it. And so I have love-hate relationships, but not a lot of hate for it. If there was a lot of hate for it, this wouldn't be a very good relationship.
Yeah, for sure.
Does that answer the question?
That definitely answers the question. And I think it shows the excitement and the love for your characters that translates into your writing, which I'm sure the readers will be able to gauge as well. And I think they'll be entertained by reading the books. So that actually brings me to the end of my questions. As a last word, would you like to say something to the readers about their journey while reading the story, or just something you would like to share with your readers about the books and the characters, something special to give to them?
I just think it's hopefully a really fun journey. I've been asked before, like, was it inspired by real events? Were the characters inspired by me? I've had friends or family read it before and be like, was this based off of you? Because I had a hard time picturing it. And the answer is no, because not at all. And I think the thing is, she is kind of who I wish I was at that age. And so she's got, I think, a lot of great attributes, but so much of it wasn't based off of experiences so much as feelings. And I think what I've really discovered is that those feelings, that it's all based off of the confusion and the frustration and indecision, are all things that were not by any way specific to my life, but are just a very overall human experience that everyone can relate to. And I hope enjoy that journey. And I think it was so this idea of being bound is so much about it's like past the idea of soulmates, because it's this idea of being connected and not having a choice in being connected, but then still having choices. And in life we all have choices, and so that's very much fascinating to me, is watching them make choices. And I think as a reader, sometimes you see them making the choices you want them to make, and sometimes you wish they were making other choices. And I think it's just a fun journey to see what choices they do make, and see kind of their journey of development, character development and relationship development. And I certainly think it's a fun one. I don't know that I can speak to the writing that it's, but I hope readers enjoy it.
I think they will. I think that's beautiful, and that's a great last word for the readers. And I'm sure they're going to enjoy the series. I personally did. And for all the viewers and readers out there, Bound by Fate, the first installment, is releasing on the Saga Fiction app on 3rd October. So please download the app from Google Play Store and App Store and get reading. Yeah. So thank you, Jessica, for being here. We'll see you next time. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.